Hello and welcome. I'm Petra Mayer. I'm the founder of Petra Mayer and Associates Consulting, and I'm super thrilled today having Ray Jimenez here with me today. He is the chief architect of SituationExpert, a very, very interesting system that I wanted to share with you today. Thank you, Ray, for joining me today, and I'm really thrilled to have you.
Well, thanks for having me. Let's have fun and exchange ideas. Thank you.
That is a good idea. Always fun to exchange ideas with you, Ray. So before we dive into the topic of today's session here and interview, in a sentence or two, can you give us the primary benefit of your system, SituationExpert?
Yeah. The primary benefit focuses on organizations trying to solve problems and allowing the learners to learn in the process. So that is the core capability of SituationExpert.
Wow, that is very concise. So we're talking about solution finding. So organizations solving problems all the time, but now we're doing it in a way that the individuals who are going through it are also learning along the way. Right. So that's a very interesting way to show learning. Now, how does that differentiate it from a traditional, more usual mainstream learning management system?
Right. The traditional learning management systems are born out of instruction. So their main core is memorization, testing, and checking, and compliance. It has its own value. SituationExpert is born out of the necessity to discover answers at work and using that opportunity to help the workers and the learners trying to fix, solve, and improve work. And along the way, they learn. Mm-hmm. So we start with the other side, which is the application in real-life situations, rather than learning to memorize the concepts.
Mm-hmm. And that is very, very crucial for organizations. So SituationExpert, then, could we say safely, it is built for the corporate environment?
It is for corporate, and it is for any group or individuals, maybe nonprofit, who really want to focus on using the work situation as a learning opportunity. And it might be in schools, it might be in corporate, but that's the crux of SituationExpert.
Mm-hmm. How did you come up with the name, SituationExpert?
Situation. We all learn from situations. And day in and day out, you can call it scenario, situation, but the bottom line is that real life issues. When we use real life issues, and more importantly, when we allow the learners and the workers to bring in real life issues, they own it. They learn from it because they own it, they understand the problems, and they are most often than not very capable people to solve their own problems. And finally, by looking at situations are real to companies. They want it fixed and they want impacts at the work situation. So, and then the expert side, SituationExpert, is that if we want to be learners, we have to be expert at learning how to think in situations. Doesn't have to be 10,000 hours of expertise, but as long as you can find a solution, solve a problem, day to day, we are experts.
Mm-hmm. Very nice way to look at it, and could also be very motivating for team members.
Yes,
to look at themselves as being an expert and having some control. It really is a bit about control too.
That's the core discovery I have. In the old way of doing things like an LMS, they assume that they need to teach people. In SituationExpert, we assume that people are capable of solving their own problems. Mm-hmm. And nice. That major shift is different because we are motivating people. People are capable. People are inspired. People are passionate. We want to get that engine of motivation to be working by allowing them to feed in their own real situations.
Very interesting. So talking about that then, what are common misconceptions when we're thinking about online learning systems?
It is a misconception because we use the technology to extend an old habit. I mean, it's almost like, a good example is we're teaching in the classroom with registering participants in the classroom, we're giving out tests. So we're using technology only to mimic that, which in my own humble opinion, an unfortunate thing. because technology should disrupt old ways of doing things by allowing learners and companies to have more latitude in exploring different ways that technology is coming. But technology can only be developed if and when the users, the members, and the company and leaders have the vision. So the challenging misconception is that the technology, the online learning system, will solve the problem. The reality is it will not. It will just extend. It will probably add efficiency. It will add reduce head counts. It will add all of that. But it's still the big misconception is technology will improve our lives. In most cases, it don't if we don't add on some serious strategy and serious disruption of how we used to think of things.
So how does SituationExpert do that? Give us some secrets.
Right. A good secret is, for example, a real life example is this. One of our large client company, the biggest in the world in logistics, all the air freight and they're very, very large. So they train their technicians and engineers of the 747s to go through like a 6 months in between training, 5 weeks here, and then they go back to work 5 weeks here. They noticed that nothing happens really in between the 6 months. So they want to raise the issue of readiness. So now what they're doing is they're asking their engineers and their technician to report using SituationExpert a problem, an issue that they encounter once a month at work. And they collect those. They have an online interaction, they have online assessment, they have used a lot of the thinking tools to allow them to stay close to work issues. At the same time, use and learning that. So that is what we call filling in the gaps, where the gaps are very important, and filling in the unknown answers. So that is where SituationExpert flourishes.
Mm-hmm.
It fills the answers. It helps the learners to discover answers by thinking through problems without even necessarily going through a training program. Now, some people will hate hearing that because some people say, oh, we need to train them. But most adults have skills already. Most adults go to formal learning. Most engineers know what to do. What they don't know what to do is how to really locate good answers and create new knowledge. And that is what SituationExpert is all about.
And so what happens then in that situation where they can't find the answer, where they need to get other input, or their answer needs to be verified by anybody?
Right. And that's really the biggest opportunity in learning. Now, in the LMSs, they don't address that problem because it's very challenging to address. But in SituationExpert, what we have done is to build the connections among people, really make sure that they go to their trusted relationships in order to discuss a very specific process, right? And then we allow them some real metrics to see what are the gaps and allow them to find creative solutions amongst themselves or outside themselves. And then finally track the impacts and simply say, have I really improved my performance and my contribution at work? So it's the same core concept of learning, feedback, application, but learning while they're trying to fix a problem rather than learning in an isolated learning management system where you go click lesson, you memorize lesson, and you don't practically remember a lot of the ideas because it's too far away from work. Here, we help the learners through the system so that they can we have about 30 thinking tools. And the thinking tools are just models for the learners to have a little bit of a guide on how to have penetrating, provocative, and evocative kind of conversations so that their answers can be located or situated.
Awesome. So what do you think are recent trends in online learning, and how does that impact choice of systems? How does SituationExpert kind of respond to these trends?
Right. The trend has been that we are tired, and again, I'm ready for tomatoes in my face. We are tired of the click forward, kick forward, and compliance only type of LMSs. It serves its own function because there are many organizations that needs compliance. And the biggest problem with that is that many of our colleagues now begin to think that that is the way learning is. compliant, checking, etc., like, which is kind of really unfortunate. So the trends now is trying to free the learners. Now you're familiar with the corporate nomads. We're getting into this new culture today where people want to assert themselves. So the trend is allowing learning systems to become more freer, emancipates the learner, allows them more room to control their environment, to control their learning, allow them more choices. And they are pursuing what is free for them as a learning process. So they're looking for experiences, they're looking for third-party inputs from relationships, third-party relationship and systems that support them. They have a lot of openness to integrating quickly. For example, learning in a situation does not separate itself from operations, so there's a need for integration. Now, a good example is that SituationExpert is used right now by another company. And what we have done was to do SituationExpert, but also connect it to MRO, which is your maintenance, and repairs and operation, so that if they have a problem that they discover in fixing a particular component of an equipment, they could check into the newest update of the repairs and the newest update of procurements. That way they can solve the problems quickly. So this is like bringing learner, merging them together rather than separating them. So these are some of the trends that they can see. And SituationExpert is at the crux of this, because we have left, we have departed, we have gone away from the concept of just learn the content. Companies are looking for not learning the content, but really impacting their businesses.
And I think when I was listening to you, when you started speaking, I was thinking about particularly the new generations of learners versus maybe the baby boomers who have had a certain experience of what learning should look like. But now the new learners that are coming into the organizations, the younger generations, I think they will really value what you are describing here, that freedom, that being in control, that designing their own learning journey.
Right. Yeah, and that's a one. I'm coming up with a workshop, if you don't mind my saying it, Petra. It's entitled Just in Time, Just Enough Learning for Corporate Nomads. Because those corporate nomads, like you and I are nomads too, because you and I work in the airplane, and we work in the beach too, right? And many of us once have this.
Don't tell my secrets.
I do that often. So this ability to free learning is not just for the newer generation or the completely gig economy, but even for people like you and me who wants to have exercise our freedom in order to improve our well-being and spending more time. So just in time, okay, and just enough learning that helps this nomads is very important, because that's the way it's done. So, but to do this, you need a different way of thinking a platform. You cannot have a restrictive, confined, knowledge-only platform. You have a platform that is so close to work, because if I'm learning, I don't want to learn anything superfluous. I want to learn something that I can use now, because I want to enjoy the beach. I don't want to be attending courses. I'm kidding.
Yeah, no, I think you're so spot on with this. So when organizations who want to offer online training, when they want to consider what kind of system they need, what do you think they need to take into considerations?
There's a real interesting challenge. It's always like a business question more than a learning question. The business question really is to formulate a strategy of how you want to disrupt your learning methodology in the organization. So if you have an operational problem, for example, you are in the delivery business, logistics, or you are in healthcare, there are things that are very slow because our assumptions of learning platforms has to go to it's cumbersome. So if you want to get rid of that, shorten the process, we need to have firstly a strategy that's clear enough how to eliminate, I'm very bold in this, eliminate what slows down things, because we don't want to slow down things. So that's number one, understanding. And then secondly, to really envision, add a vision to it and simply say, with technology, what else can we do in order to catapult results, reduce waste, increase our performance to tenfold or 100-fold, challenge ourselves, because the technology has so much capability, but we are the one creating the imagination to push the technology. So strategy and pushing our own imagination in order to prescribe and locate and build and tell the platform people that you gotta be more creative than just mimicking existing behaviors of learners and leaders.
Mhm. So where do you think is your sweet spot? Who is the ideal user or the ideal organization who would tap into SituationExpert and gets the most benefit out of it?
I've observed two types. Number one is those who are doing classical traditional learning. They get to face a wall and say, gee, our application is not happening. We have a good explanation of the FAQ, the procedure, but it doesn't happen. So that case, they attach SituationExpert. And they would say, now that you know the principle, go out there and apply the idea by looking for a problem and see how it's going to work. So that one situation. The other side of that would be there are real problems at work, and companies need all the technologies and the tools to identify those problems and get everyone thinking of fixing them as they notice them. So that's another big model that is happening. So it's almost like operational in nature. Most of the clients we work with are operations people, our logistics, our healthcare and operations people, because they recognize it that the approach should be look for a problem, solve the problem, and along the way learn it. And one of my favorite quotes from a client, he said that it is like learning without knowing that one is learning.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I love that quote from him.
Yeah, yeah. I've got to think about that. So I find that what you're speaking about is so in line with the adult learning principles. Like, we don't want to learn stuff that we don't use. We want to learn at the time that we need it, and we want to be in control of our learning experience and design it in some ways around the needs that we have. So your system really serves the adult learner.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And reality of life is we only learn by doing things, and we learn things when we have consequences in real life. I love your example earlier. If it's not in the bonus, nobody will do it, right? So so let's bring in those numbers attached to learning, because people then begin to focus more in understanding how to contribute better.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So, okay, now we get a good sense of what we can achieve with SituationExpert. What does a typical implementation look like for an organization?
What I've discovered was that we look for a pain area in an operation. Like, for example, there's shortfall, there's delays, there's bottlenecks, there is probably a problem with too much waste and cost, or the company is trying to launch a product and they want to make sure that it's well supported. So we identify pain points, or we identify initiatives that needs that component where questions might come up that nobody knows how to answer. So that's the staging point. So looking for that, and then we test it. We simply develop the configuration of SituationExpert to match that need. And then we beta it, we test it, we pilot it, and then we just get feedback. You iterate the process. But in my experience, it always starts better with small groups. Unlike an LMS, where you can launch it for 10,000 people almost every night, overnight, and say, okay, you need to get this program overnight for 10,000 people. It's a very impersonal approach, but it's doable in the LMS. And that's the strength of the LMS. But SituationExpert is different. We're looking for those areas of high impact. And then we attach SituationExpert as a tool that will help the workers, the line person, and the leaders in that business unit.
Mm-hmm. So I think what I'm hearing you say is that an organization, particularly a large organization, may have the need for both. you said very early in our interview here that there is some requirement where they have to check off that somebody has done, let's say, their health and safety training. So there is a real that's a real benefit of an LMS to do that. But on the other hand, there's all these different situations where an organization wants to improve on processes or resolve issues for which the LMS isn't the right tool. So SituationExpert could be the tool that helps them in that area. Would you say that that's a fair statement?
Right. I was speaking to one of our top thought leaders in the industry, and he mentioned that the informal learning side of what we do is so powerful that we know it's there. In fact, we influence our thinking and our work that way heavily, but there's no answer to it because it's kind of a nebulous, hard to grasp kind of a concept, right? The formal learning, which is probably about 10-20% of all the knowledge delivery, is all done by the LMSs, which is rightfully so. It's designed for that. SituationExpert is designed for this gray area.
That's a really interesting point you're making there, because I think the gray area is also the one that it can have a huge impact.
Yes.
But I think it also makes it difficult for organizations to make decisions on system support in those areas.
Right. That's why the approach of SituationExpert is more like surgical, specific, rather than broad kind of content delivery. And in that case, that's a major difference between the LMS, because the LMS is a broad stroke delivery of knowledge, which is a strength. A SituationExpert is really to get things done, identify something small that you can deal with, and keep it rolling that way. It's more organic, whereas LMSs are what I call artificial, if I can say that word. Why? Because they're teaching people to learn what they should learn in real life, but they put them in a lab, which is a clicking of pages and interaction. And it has its own purpose. It's almost like going to school, right? But at the end of school, we need to go out and do the job. And that's what SituationExpert is all about.
So great if you can to combine them and utilize them to their strengths. And I am making an assumption here. There is an integration opportunity.
Most of the time we integrate with LMSs.
Yes.
You know, because although SituationExpert has the capability to have content, there's just massive compliance program. To give an example, the LMSs are good at, many of them are connected with legislations. Many of them are connected with, for example, the health, the FDA approval system. So there's a lot of this compliance certification is there. It is very valuable for safety, valuable for following restrictions, and it has its own place. And I don't think it will disappear. But we have to also recognize that that is not learning per se. That's what I call compliance, which may not be necessarily all about learning.
So the systems have their different use cases, and I think that speaks very much to what I've done with clients, where sometimes they decide on a system before they actually really understand what their requirements are. And that's usually a painful process, because then later you try to work within the constraints of the system because of the financial contribution that the business has made into that LMS and the investment. Now, talking about investment, what is the pricing model that your organization, that you offer to your client organizations?
Well, there's about 2 or 3 tiers of work. Number one is if you are a medium, small type, and you want to get 500 people started, around ballpark of about $1,500 US dollars per month. And then there might be $5,000 to $10,000 of upfront configuration setup. And then if there is integration, that would be probably another charge or another fee. And then as you grow, you just pay extra per person in that level. So it's a very affordable, what I call affordable investment, and with the amount of value that one is getting from the system.
Okay. So as we're closing here, what is one thing that you wish all clients would know before they come to see you?
What all clients, before they come see us, is basically the fact that there are very creative ways to look at a problem. And learning is so vital in what we do day in and day out. And we are so, just because an LMS is so familiar, the familiarity makes us feel that it is the only natural thing. What we need to look at is that there are disruptions. Situation expert we consider as a disruption, not only by myself, but from the people that we talk to. And you are doing a strategy, look for those outliers, those disruptors, because they probably answer some of the questions where the traditional, seemingly comfortable, natural solutions would easily come in because we're familiar, but they may not carry over there. So think disruptors. Who are the disruptors when you're looking at procuring, strategy formulating, and willing to do implementation of a learning system?
Awesome. Well, Ray, thank you so much for sharing with us about your system. I'm fascinated by your system. I've been really interested in it. I think it is such a need in the market to have a system like yours that has that flexibility. Organic, yeah, as you mentioned, is organic, to adapt to the needs of the organization. Of course, that requires some insights, some strategy around how to set it up. I'm thrilled to have you here today, and I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Petra. It's wonderful to have this conversation with you, and more power to you.
Thank you so much.
Good.